Another day, another one-day build, and we are going to grind our way through this one. Bear with me, that pun actually bears fruit. Okay, so in 1981, I am a 14-year-old boy, and I go and have my mind blown by John Boorman's unbelievable film, Excalibur. Everyone's walking around in armor, but mostly there's also this sword, this amazing sword. I went home from seeing that movie, grabbed a slat off of the basement of my parents' house, and made myself an Excalibur pretty much exactly like this one, with aluminum tape so I could swing it around and pretend that I was King Arthur. Okay, flash forward to last year. I go to Weta Workshop, where my new friend Peter Lyon, the sword master for Weta Workshop, who made all the swords for Lord of the Rings, helps me get my sword on, and together we make this. He teaches me how to grind myself a Strider sword in a single day, and we make this, and it's one of my favorite objects. But now it's time to put those two things together and use the sword grinding skills I learned from Peter with my passion for Excalibur, and to grind myself an Excalibur sword. Whooshing! Now, when it comes to sword grinding, it turns out that you need more than just a standard belt grinder. You need what's called a linisher, which is a type of belt grinder specifically for grinding swords and blades. And Peter Lyon and the wonderful blokes at Weta have built their own, and this is apparently sort of a rite of passage for a sword grinder, and I took that as a challenge, and I made my own linisher based off the design of the one that I was using to make my Strider sword at Weta. It works beautifully. It has interchangeable belts. You can do heavy, you can do light, you can do the 3M material, and this is the primary tool I'm going to be using today to grind Excalibur. It's going to be a long one because there's a lot of work to do. So how do we begin? Well, with this. I bought this beautiful rendition of Excalibur. This is a very, very good copy of the one from the film a few years ago. So I'm going to be copying in form this sword. One notable difference, the hero Excalibur from the film has a wider fuller than this. That's the groove. The fuller is the groove here in the middle of the blade, and it's done for lightning. It's not a blood groove. It never was. But the one in the movie is actually wider than this, so I am going to be replicating the one from the film and using a wider, fuller design than this. All right. This piece of 1/4-inch aluminum will be my Excalibur when I'm done with it. But first, I've got to trace and make sure that I'm getting my sword the right shape. All right, so it's going to be 1/2 inch. Okay, so here is an interesting dilemma. A couple of years ago at Comic-Con, there was a display of some screen-used Excalibur armor and what was claimed to be a screen-used sword, hero Excalibur sword from John Boorman's Excalibur. So I took some close-up pictures of it, and you'll notice here that the fuller is quite wide and disappears right into the guard. However, I also have a picture of Nigel Terry, who played King Arthur, grabbing the sword in the stone here from the film, and you'll notice that the fuller here is not as wide and actually ends in a bowl rather than disappearing right into the guard. So I have choices to make. I have something claimed to be the hero sword that has a different shaped fuller than the one that I can see is definitely one of the hero swords. So I think I'm going to split the difference. Definitely the fuller in this film is a little bit wider than the fuller on this replica. But because I can see the bowl that the fuller makes here, I am going to follow that, which is harder, but I feel like it's more true. I'm cleaning up one of my Sharpie lines because it's not accurate enough and it's not even. If I'm not even now, I'm not going to get more even later. And And since a Sharpie is an alcohol-based marker, a little rubbing alcohol gets rid of it quite handily. I have never, ever regretted marking something too carefully. Never regretted it. Got to make a couple of cuts here. I'm going to slice this off here. I want to trim this blade down because I don't need all this aluminum. Right. I have one more mark to make, and that is I'm going to mark right up the center of the fuller so that I can see my center line. Oh, I get it. You're wondering, what is this far out marker that you are using? Tom Sachs turned me onto these. These are called Pica inks, and they're meant for transferring patterns from holes. So you can see that the tip of this is very, very, very narrow, and it's long, so it gives you this Sharpie type mark with extreme precision. They make it in red and black, and I bought a dozen of each. All right, so I have marked the fuller. It's now time to grind it, so I'm going to use a 2-inch wheel and a basic medium grit sanding belt. Let's get to grinding. That's not actually bad. All right, we'll give it a shot. Oh, okay. I'm really pleased with that. That is a fuller done on one side. I am hitting my marks almost exactly. I'm here to tell you, the dudes that do this every day, Peter Lyon, Tony Swatton, Man at Arms, I'm looking at you guys. My hat is off to you. This is back-breaking, and I'm only like an hour into it. I've got to grind the fuller on the other side, and then it's grind, 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 grind. Lots of grinding. But I am really pleased with how even this looks. It's a nice start, an auspicious start. On to the other side. I have completed the fuller on both sides, and it's now time, because I no longer need this guide of the flat edge for the fuller, to cut out the outer shape of my blade. Okay, that is the rough outline of my blade. Now I need to take it on to my belt sander and even it out so I can start to carve the shape of the rest of the blade. So I've replaced my sanding belt with a very rough one for hogging out. That's because this edge of my blade is super uneven and I want to get it really nice and straight. There we go.
All right, my blade is starting to look like a genuine blade. The outer shape has been ground and it's nice and smooth. One of the things that I took away from Peter Lyon's patient training when I made the Strider sword was that at every stage, your marks should be clear and your edges should be smooth and flat, and like each stage should be proceeded to after everything is really nice. So that is what I'm trying to do, teacher. I hope that I'm not making you guys cringe. Time to make some marks up the center of this thickness, because that is what I'm going to start to grind to. Oh, and one other thing. My Excalibur will actually be a slightly easier blade to grind than the Strider sword, and here's why. Notice that on the Strider sword, from the fuller to the edge, it's a concavity. That's called a hollow grind. And on Excalibur, it is a convexity. It is not a hollow grind. I don't know what the other kind of grind is called, but it is a slope rather than a valley. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's convex instead of concave. That should make it easier to grind. Now, with my fuller cut, my edges shaped, and my markings done, it's time to rough out the slope, and that I'm going to do on my other belt sander. My big linisher is a 72-inch belt linisher. This is a 48-inch belt linisher, and this is a really lovely knife grinding machine. It can change its orientation from upright to horizontal. You can swap out multiple sizes of wheels here, 1, 2, 3. I am only using this because it gives me the right attitude with which to do the grinding. I'd have to radically alter that one. So there we go. All right, I have finished the rough grinding with the 3M belt on the linisher, and that is where I actually stopped on the Strider blade. But there's a key difference of Excalibur, which is that Excalibur is a polished blade, like highly polished. So I'm taking 220 grit sandpaper to it to bring it that final bit of finishing before I hit it with a polishing wheel. It should brighten it up to a nice bright, bright shine. Now it's time to attack the groove, and I want to be very careful about this because the sharpness of the transition from the fuller to the rest of the blade is one of the key things that really sells this blade as a high precision item. So I don't want to get sloppy about that. I have successfully 220 gritted this to my satisfaction. Wait. I haven't quite. Hold on. It's never quite finished. All right, that's enough 220 gritting. It's time for polishing. Dude, I'm getting so happy with this. Okay, I'm just gonna do a rough wipe off of the polishing compound so you can see where we've gotten to. That's roughed out with 220 grit. That is polished. Now, I have some more polishing to do, but dude, I am so psyched about this. All right, before I get too psyched, I'm gonna get back to work. Ladies and gentlemen, we're close. That's beautiful. I still think I can do some more polishing of this. Clearly I need to do a little more polishing wheel action, but hell's bells. That is really, really shaping up nicely. Excalibur. I must say, 14-year-old me is quite impressed. Now it's time to make the rest of the attachments for this so that it can officially live out the rest of its life as a sword instead of just a piece of aluminum that's been shaped to look like a sword blade. First order of business is to fit the guard. Now, off camera a few months ago, in a peak of brass cutting zeal, I made the guard for Excalibur. This is exact to the other sword. So I have already marked it. It's now time to make the cut on the bandsaw for the guard and the handle. I know the handle has a name, but I can't remember it right now. Ladies and germs. That's it. Awesome. We are proceeding apace. I have a guard on here made of brass that matches the original exactly. I have the handle part. I have not wound silver wire around it. I do have that silver wire here. I'm going to wind it in actual silver, but I haven't done that yet. Before I do that, I want to make sure all the other parts work. So I'm going to have to cut down this little part of the tang and thread it so that it threads onto this brass part. And now it's time for me to make the brass part. Yeah, this is going to be fun. I get to use the lathe. Look at that. All right, I'm going to give this some softer edges, and then I'll get to tapping it and putting it. What is this thing called in my hands? This is called a die. It is for cutting threads. It's the other half of a tap and die set. I'm cutting these threads at 1/4 inch to 20 threads per inch, standard quarter 20. And this is so that I can assemble my sword and take it back apart again, which I'm going to want to do several times as I do the final fit and polish of everything. I have a full set of dies and they're amazing. My pro tip is use lots of cooling fluid and come back and break off the stuff that you're slicing. You'll understand when you're doing it. It's quite impressive. The material I'm moving is being removed by cutting blades, and they're frictioned against and cutting through the aluminum, and this is actually quite hot. The whole tang is warm just from the friction of slicing and cutting these threads for this rat tail. There's that. Hey, it's totally working. Ah, that's awesome. I'm leaving this proud so that I can trim it later if I want to. Okay, so I can see. The next thing I'm going to do, now that I've done the guard and the pommel, is to do the checkerboard thing that fits inside the pommel. That's just going to be a little more lathe work. Here we go. Okay, so now as I'm looking at this pommel and its checkered pattern, I have a radius cutter for my lathe, but that's not a radius, not by any means. It's actually more of a, in fact, I noticed that both sides are not equivalent to each other. So this is sort of hand pattern, and I'm gonna do the same exact thing. So what I'm doing right now, after having done the rough shaping of my brass convexity that goes into the pommel, is I am doing a polish. So I'm starting with 150 grit sandpaper after using the finger sander to shape it. And this is hopefully going to pull out any of the sort of large, gross marks, even them out. But 150 grit isn't close to a fine polish. So once I've got some confidence that 150 grit has taken out, like I said, most of the big marks. I go in with a little Scotch-Brite 3M material, this allows me to sort of see it. This also removes just a little bit of material. It's not going to take care of deep scratches, but it will help me see where I might need help. And then I'll finish with a little 000 or quadruple zero steel wool. And this is where I really get to see the art of the possible. That's it. See that? See, I still see some little marks in there. I can take care of that with some 320 grit. Yeah! Oh man! Do I ever love polishing brass? Look at that. You can see your face or your cameraman in that reflection, yeah. All right, now it's time to grind my checkerboard. I've never done something like this before, so your guess is as good as mine as to how well it will go. I'm not going to cut my pommel sides off until the checkers have been fully ground, and that's by design. I want to have something to hold on to, obviously. Then once I've got the checkerboard in and polished, I'll cut it off and install it. All right, let's do the other side. My checker is marked. Time to get to filing. I am going to go for a triangular file for this operation, of which I have a couple. Oh, I have several. Good. Yeah. All right. Time to install. Dude. Boop, boop. So. Ah. Oh, that's so pretty. Look, look. Oh, that looks like I know what I'm doing. That is freaking beautiful. Okay, still have a bunch of work to do. Next up, I've got all the brass done. The blade is polished. Okay, next up is the handle, which is going to be twisted silver wire, I believe, is how we're doing this. .15. Let's actually say 0.14. Clear. 0.14. Yeah, no, each of these is 48 feet. I'm in really, 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 really good shape. So that's 22 feet, and I've got 48 feet. Joey? Yeah. Can I get your help? Sure. Can you hold that? Yeah, we're going to be close to 20 feet here. I think this is 30 wide. All right, come towards me. All right, here we go. About to twist silver wire times 22 feet. It's working beautifully. I had thought that the wires on the handle were braided, but they're not. They're twisted, but there's two sets of twisted pairs and they're in opposition to each other, so it makes this kind of pattern. Haha! Crack the code! We're off to a good start. I need a little CA glue. I gotta tell you, even something as simple as winding this silver wire around this thing, it's like you watch Peter Lyon do his work, or Tony Swatton, Man at Arms, any of these YouTube channels, and these guys make it look so easy, but it's so hard to communicate how physically demanding this stuff is. My hands are cramping up. I've got to hold constant pressure on this, otherwise it'll unwind. And I don't get to take a break until it's all completely wound on itself. Holy cow. I did it with 4 inches of wire on one side to spare. Crazy. Crazy good. Oh, look at that. Damn. Production value, man. And that is all the wire I had left. Look, I know you probably saw this spool too, but I don't know how much is on this spool, so that was not necessarily my plan B. Oh, so cool. Okay. All right. All right, the blade. The guard. The pommel. The handle. Ah, I'm really pleased with how this is looking. Okay. Good. Okay, so now it's time to put these bad boys in, and that is going to be with a little bit of cyanoacrylate. Come on. Ladies and gentlemen, yeah! I'm really excited about this. That's the replica. There's my replica of the replica. I am damned pleased with that. I have been wanting this sword. Ooh, it's even actually almost correctly balanced. I have been wanting this sword forever. Yay! All right, let's go find a dragon.